Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to get into something I never really thought about before, but you sent over some really interesting stuff about it, sewage treatment.
Yeah.
You really piqued my interest with these research papers and articles about, of all things, the BOD test. So this is how we measure how clean our wastewater is. At least I thought it was.
Well, that's what it's supposed to do. The BOD test, it stands for biochemical oxygen demand, by the way. It basically tells you how much oxygen microorganisms need to break down the waste in the water.
So like the cleaner the water, the less oxygen those little guys need, right?
Makes sense, right?
Yeah,
Less pollution, less for the microbes to eat, less oxygen they use.
straightforward.
The problem is the most common version of the test, the one that most treatment plants actually rely on, it only tells half the story.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. What are we missing?
It all comes down to the type of bacteria, really. There are two main types in sewage treatment. And they have, let's just say they have very different tastes. It's like a buffet, but with like two really picky eaters.
Okay, I'm kind of grossed out, but I'm also strangely curious about this sewage buffet.
So first you've got your CBOD that's mostly made up of carbonaceous waste. Think of the stuff heterotrophic bacteria love, like, fecal matter.
So that's picky eater number one.
Exactly. But then you've got nitrogenous waste, right? Things like urine, proteins, that sort of thing. And that, my friend, is the favorite dish of nitrifying bacteria, the autotrophic kind. Picky eater number two.
Two different bacteria, two very different menus, but both of them need oxygen to, I guess, to break down their food,
You
right?
got it.
So what you're saying is the standard BOD test, it really only looks at what one of these picky eaters is up to.
You're getting it. And to make matters worse, there's actually a test called the TKN test that accurately measures nitrogenous waste.
Wait, hold on. We're measuring the wrong thing, and we have a test that measures the right thing, but we don't use it. Why would we do that?
Well, a lot of it comes down to speed, believe it or not. The original BOD test was a 30-day process. Imagine the backlog. So to speed things up, they started using a quicker 5-day version called the BOD5 test.
Okay, I'm already sensing this was not a good shortcut.
That is a story for the ages, and one with some alarmingly smelly consequences.
So we're essentially ignoring half of what's going on in our wastewater. Why does this matter to the average person who, flushes and forgets?
Well, think of it like this. Imagine you're hosting a dinner party, but you only prepare half the meal. Your guests might not be too happy, right?
Especially if they came hungry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the same with our waterways. When we release wastewater that isn't treated properly back into the environment, we're basically giving these nitrogen-loving bacteria a gourmet buffet. What happens when you overfeed anything?
Things get messy, and in this case, those messes have some pretty far-reaching consequences, right? One name really stuck out to me in the research you sent, Dr. Peter Maier. Who is this guy?
Ah, Dr. Maier. He's a retired environmental engineer, and he's dedicated his career to, well, sounding the alarm on this very issue.
And judging from what we've discussed so far, environmental disaster might not even be an exaggeration. So what exactly happens when all that untreated nitrogen gets into our lakes and rivers?
Remember those nitrifying bacteria we talked about, the ones who just love nitrogen? They go into overdrive, they start multiplying like crazy, consuming huge amounts of oxygen from the water.
So they're basically sucking all the air out of the water.
Pretty much. It's called eutrophication. And it can essentially choke the life out of entire aquatic ecosystems.
Eutrophication, it sounds like slowly suffocating a lake or a river.
That's a good way to put it, and it's already happening in many places.
Yeah.
That dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, that's a really stark example of eutrophication on a massive scale.
Yeah, thousands of square miles of ocean, basically devoid of life. How does that even happen?
A lot of it comes down to the massive amount of nitrogen pollution that flows into the Gulf from the Mississippi River. Think about all the cities, towns, farms, everything, all that wastewater, even if it's been treated, it still has nitrogen in it.
And because we aren't accurately measuring and treating for nitrogen, it all ends up in the Gulf, leading to this massive dead zone.
Right. And it's not just a problem in the Gulf. These dead zones are popping up all over the world.
Yeah.
And they can have some really devastating consequences.
Like what? What kind of consequences are we talking about?
Well, for starters, it's incredibly harmful to marine life. Fish and other aquatic animals, they need oxygen to survive, right? Imagine being underwater and suddenly you can't breathe.
That's terrifying. And it's not just the fish, entire ecosystems are affected, right?
Absolutely. We rely on healthy oceans for everything: food, oxygen, regulating the climate. When we disrupt those ecosystems, we threaten everything, including ourselves.
Okay, so we've established this is a big deal. And you mentioned earlier this isn't just a problem in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a similar situation unfolding a lot closer to home, right here in Salt Lake City's backyard.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right. We'll get into that right after.
Wait, hold on. You're going to leave me hanging like that?
Haha. All right. All right.
Wait.
We can talk about it now. For decades now, treated wastewater from Salt Lake City has been flowing into Farmington Bay. That's part of the Great Salt Lake. Remember how we were talking about the BOD test and how it doesn't account for all the nitrogen?
I'm starting to see where this is going.
Hey, well, all that wastewater, even after it's treated, it still carries a lot of nitrogen, and it's been feeding the wrong kind of bacteria in Farmington Bay. Just like in the Gulf, it's creating a nitrogen overload. Researchers are already finding huge algae blooms, the water clarity is decreasing, and the oxygen levels are dropping.
So we're basically creating a dead zone in our own backyard, in the Great Salt Lake.
It's a real concern.
Hmm.
And it just goes to show how a small oversight, like relying on an incomplete test, can turn into a really big problem.
So what can we do about it? Is it too late? Is Dr. Maier's work just a drop in the bucket, or are there actual solutions to this nitrogen problem?
It's definitely not too late. There are things we could do. The first thing is we have to improve our testing methods. We already have the TPN test. We just need to start using it in all sewage treatment plants along with the BOD test.
Measure twice, cut once, right? But even with better testing, upgrading all these treatment plants to deal with the extra nitrogen, that has to be incredibly expensive.
It would take a lot of investment, for sure. But it's an investment in our future, right? And a lot of experts, Dr. Maier included, they argue that some of the newer treatment technologies, things like oxidation ditches, they can be a lot more effective without breaking the bank.
Oxidation ditches, what are those?
They basically mimic how nature cleans itself up, but in a controlled way. They create these ideal conditions for both types of bacteria, the ones that break down carbonaceous waste and the ones that handle nitrogen. They can both thrive and work effectively.
So it's like a supercharged, efficient version of what happens naturally.
Exactly. And it's not even always about building brand new treatment plants. A lot of times, existing facilities can be retrofitted. They can add treatment stages designed to remove nitrogen.
So we've got the technology, we've got the experts like Dr. Maier speaking up. What's the holdup?
It's partly about raising awareness. A lot of people don't know about this issue, or they don't understand how serious it is. But there's also the political side of things, and of course the money.
So it's political and it all comes down to money. That's never a good combination.
Right. But it's not just about the money, it's about priorities. Remember that article about Salt Lake City and Nancy Saxton, the city councilwoman? She was really concerned about the Great Salt Lake, worried that we're just turning it into a cesspool.
Yeah, I remember that.
She gets it. But even she was saying how tough it is for cities to make these upgrades, especially without clear national standards from, the EPA.
So someone has to set some rules, some standards, but no one wants to be the first to move, right? Because it's expensive.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. But that's why it's so important to talk about this stuff. Most people have no idea any of this is even happening.
So what can we do? I mean, most of us aren't politicians or engineers.
True, but we can still make a difference. We can get informed, and we can talk to people about it. We can call our representatives, write letters, make some noise, let them know this is something we care about.
So it's about making clean water a priority, letting our leaders know we're willing to invest in solutions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This isn't just about sewage. It's about protecting our planet.
That's a great point. It's about our health, our future. So next time you flush, maybe take a second to think about where all that water goes, right? What's lurking beneath the surface. Thanks for diving deep with us today.